My wife of 28 years had an affair with our therapist. My wife, F48, and I, M51, have been married for 28 years. Our marriage had been relatively good for most of the time, at least I thought so. We have 5 kids, current ages 26 to 15. She was a stay-at-home mom for about 23 years, but the last 5 years she has gone back to work. About 8 years ago, my wife left our religion. I tried to support her the best I could while staying faithful myself, but she began to resent that I did not leave with her. She claimed I wouldn't listen to her arguments because she was a woman. That wasn't true, but I did and do feel strongly about staying in the faith. She also had complaints about me not helping enough with kids and chores, etc., which sadly I must agree with. I definitely could have done better there. I have depression and have been on medication for the past 15 years. Still, I had a lot low energy according to my wife, and she would complain it was bringing her down. Beyond those complaints, I felt we were much like a lot of other couples with some minor problems but still in a loving relationship. Apparently the minor problems were more of an issue for her. She began going to a therapist, M50, about 6 years ago, and a little later I began seeing him too, individually. Several of our kids also saw him, and he was really good for them. I didn't go to see him very regularly, but though he was a nice guy and he and a psychiatrist on staff would adjust my medications and I felt I was doing better. Recently, my wife began acting oddly. It started with some late-night phone calls that she would take in her home office. I assumed she was talking with her sister or mother as she often would, just not that late at night normally. One day, she sat me down and told me that she thought our marriage was in trouble but didn't want a divorce. This shocked me, but I assured her I wanted her to be happy and that we could work on things and start some couples counseling. I thought I had some time to improve my own behavior and start the counseling. Then, she started staying out late at night, telling me she was visiting a friend who was having problems. I wasn't worried about this at first, but it happened several nights in a row, and she wouldn't come home until midnight or later. This raised some flags because she worked early in the morning and she strongly guarded her sleep time, but she assured me she was just visiting her friend. We had a family tracking app on our phones that we mainly used to check on our children, but we could track each other too. One night when she still wasn't home, I decided to see where she was. I didn't know where her friend lived and the location that showed up was a residential area, so I assumed it was her friend's house and my wife came home shortly after that. She pretended she had been at her friend's. She didn't go out for a few nights, but then did again and was still out around 2 a.m. I woke up and found she wasn't home, so curiously I checked the app and she was at the same location. Starting to have suspicions, I decided to Google the address. The first Google result was the professional website of therapist. He had a home office. I didn't want to believe it and wanted to find benign reasons she would be seeing therapist so late. But not being able to think of any, I saw that his phone number was listed on his website. I logged into our phone carrier's site and started looking at my wife's call and text logs. That same number was coming up hundreds of times. In fact, it was over 1,300 times in the past 6 weeks. I noted that the times of most of the calls and texts were late at night, but many were also during the day. I went back to bed and pretended I was asleep when she finally came home, just long enough to change into her work clothes and then leave for work. The next morning I woke up hoping that I had dreamt the investigating I did, but some Googling later confirmed what I had found. I started documenting everything. By this time, I hadn't seen therapist in over a year. A few days later, I asked her if she had seen therapist lately. She replied no, not in a couple months. I then asked if she was sure she hadn't seen him, and she huffily replied again no, but I then told her I knew she was lying. I told her I had tracked her at his house. She tried to deny it still and said that therapist had moved and that wasn't his house anymore. This was partially true, he was in the process of moving out of state. I said that it was too much of a coincidence that she was visiting an address that just happened to be therapist's former house. I then presented all the evidence I had collected. She broke down and admitted to it. Her next reaction was to ask me not to get therapist in trouble. I replied I didn't want to get anyone in trouble, but I had to think about the situation since what therapist had done was wrong on so many levels. She also maintained that she didn't want to legally divorce because she didn't want to have to move and our daughter was still in high school, etc. She did, however, say that she felt like our relationship was over and wanted to have an open marriage. I told her I needed time to think about things. She said her relationship with the therapist was ending anyway since he was moving. She did, however, continue to go see therapist and help him finish packing up. After he moved, they continued to phone and text all the time. I was still in shock and decided to go see another counselor at the same provider. Long story short, I ended up informing them about the affair. Therapist had still been working for the same employer after he moved, just doing counseling sessions remotely. But he was now fired. From what I have learned, he thought he wouldn't be able to work as a therapist anymore, but apparently after 6 months, he has found employment again with a counseling outfit in his new state. My wife and I decided to legally divorce. We are still sharing a house together until our youngest graduates high school in a couple years. We are friendly with each other.